All right, Chris, let's go ahead and kick things off. Welcome, everyone, to the How I Automate My Work with AI webinar series. This is our third installment of the week, and I'm very excited today to be joined by Chris Garbutt from Rhone. Chris, thanks for joining today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to the whole Parabola team for inviting me. It's very nice to be included.
Absolutely. Well, very excited for today's session. Just to give you all a quick agenda here, we'll kick off with some quick intros. My name is Adam Ricefield. I lead product marketing here at Parabola. And in this session, we'll give you just a little bit of context on Parabola, just so you understand what we're talking about before Chris throws you into the deep end with some of these flows. The first AI-enabled workflow we're going to be talking about are inventory allocations, and then we'll get into inbound PO tracking as well. We'll round it out with at least 5 to 10 minutes for some Q&A, so feel free to think on some questions, drop them in the chat as we go throughout this session. But without further ado, Chris, I'll turn it over to you for a quick intro.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. My name is Chris Garbutt. I'm an operational business analyst at Rhone Apparel, where I've been for about the last 5 years. My work focuses mainly on order management, inventory management, and more recently, optimizing our process management, which is where Parabola comes in. So we're trying to streamline all our process workflows, all our audits. We've been with Parabola for maybe about 2 years now, Adam, give or take.
Sounds about right. Yep.
So yeah, it's been a great journey, and we've learned a lot, and we've still got a lot to do.
It's awesome. And Chris, I know you've worn a bunch of hats at Rhone. You've led CX there. You've had a whole life before joining Rhone. Maybe you can share a little bit about kind of your career and how you eventually landed in this spot.
Yep. So I came to the US about 7 years ago from New Zealand. When I was in New Zealand and a little bit in Australia, I was mainly involved in hotel management. So a lot of that involves inventory management, people management, and finance. I worked for the Sofitel Group in Australia and New Zealand. And before that, I was a roofer for a long time. Went back and got a information technology degree in my early 30s.
Amazing. And if you're in the audience today thinking how smooth Chris sounds live, it's because he spent all that time as a DJ radio host as well. So not unused to being live on camera here.
Very comfortable.
There we go. Awesome. Well, want to just share a little bit of context on Parabola, just so you understand what we're talking about as we run through Chris's flows here today. Want to focus on those flows, so I'll keep this under 2 minutes for you all. If this is your first time seeing Parabola, right now we are in the canvas. Parabola is an AI-enabled workflow builder that makes it easy to organize and transform the messy data running throughout your company, whether that is email data, spreadsheets, PDFs, data from siloed systems, so that you can really automate the work that you always thought would be manual. There are really 4 types of steps we use to build these flows, the first of which are steps to pull in data from really any data source. That could be something like a messy PDF, an email body, or systems in your stack like Shopify, NetSuite, Google Sheets, you name it. Once we've actually pulled in data from all of those different sources, can do things like standardize data, combine it across different sources, really anything you'd otherwise do in Excel or manually across systems, and can also just type in plain language exactly what you're trying to automate, and Parabola can actually turn your instructions into custom code using AI and give you a little summary of exactly how your data is being transformed step by step. Finally, the third type of step here are steps to send data off. That could be an email alert, it could be a visualization, it could be pushing data back to Google Sheets or Shopify, you name it. And then we're using these cards throughout to make sure we're building really well documented processes. Let's say you're building a flow for the first time. What does this actually look like in practice? Well, all you need to do is type into Parabola exactly what you're trying to build. So let's say I want help building a packing list reconciliation between a PDF and Ship Hero. Well, Parabola is going to tap into our wealth of use case knowledge, add the right steps right onto the canvas, and actually help you build just by chatting. Before I turn it over to you for use case 1, Chris, when you think about Parabola and explain it to anyone else, is there anything that you like to add that maybe I missed there?
Um, I think the alerting is pretty good too. If you're running audits, which Rhone uses Parabola a lot for, so audits of order tie-outs, inventory fulfillment tie-outs, alerting to exceptions is a big part of what we use it for.
Amazing. And I know we'll definitely hit on some of that alerting in practice today in the session. But let's jump into some inventory allocations. Chris, can you just tell us a little bit about what inventory allocation is and why this was challenging before Parabola?
Yeah, so we run an ERP connected to our 3PL's WMS. We get a PO that comes in, we've ordered some product that arrives. We now need to distribute that amongst our channels, whether that's wholesale, online, retail stores. Prior to Parabola, we would have many sheets, Google Sheets, Excel sheets, many formulas, many different reports we would have to pull from said ERPs, from Google Sheets that were internal. What we're trying to do is take away a lot of that manual work and the constant pulling of reports, create something that's scheduled, runs, kicks out a file that's ready to be uploaded to NetSuite.
Totally. And if you're not familiar, Rhone is a global men's and women's wear premium brand. I know you guys are in a lot of different wholesalers. You have a bunch of different channels. Can you give the audience just a sense of the scale at which you're operating here and how many channels you're allocating across?
Yeah, so we're currently allocating across 6 different channels. So for each PO, there's 6 different channels that inventory is potentially going to. When you take into account the intricacies of what units may or may not go to a channel, that's when it gets pretty complicated. We tried to boil it down to a simple set of rules so that we could use Parabola to its full potential and take away any sort of off the cuff movement.
Totally. And when we're dealing with something as complex as allocations across all these different channels, people might be wondering, well, do you have a whole team of ops analysts behind the scenes helping you all, building things with custom code? What does the team look like for you all?
The planning team.
Yeah, how many people are you partnering with on something like inventory allocations?
So for inventory allocations, partnering with planning team, which is I mainly deal with three people, really one in particular, Kelly. I know you're here. We sort of had to go through. There was a lot of back and forth. It was a long journey to get to where we are today because a lot of the work we had to do was really establishing the rules and making sure we can adhere to those rules always. So I think we're small teams doing big things, and that often requires a lot of intense collaboration to get to where we are today.
Totally. Go Chris and shout out Kelly in the chat there. Speaking of these rules to make sure that you all are allocating properly, let's jump into the actual flow here. So as you'll quickly see, there's a monster of a flow here that we're going to walk through. But Chris is going to kind of take us through all these different data sources. We'll walk through the logic and show you exactly how they are doing this. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you to kind of walk us through what we're looking at here.
Yeah, great. So this first one is my favorite, unclassified data, mind the naming convention. So we have the planning team have some documents where we decide how many units per store are going out to physical stores, which may differ from the number that we have on a purchase order. As an example, we may order 100 t-shirts, we may say 40 are going to retail stores. In reality, that 40 is the lifetime across those units, and we're really only sending, I'm making it up, 2 to 10 stores each, so 20. I take this into account, I pull in this data for men's and women's, I combine it, and then I send it in to combine later so I can see what number do I really need to send to retail stores.
Awesome. So that is one data source. And ultimately, we are combining that with some data that you're pulling in through the NetSuite integration. We're looking at an anonymized version of that today. So what are we working with in this card here?
So in this card, we are looking at item receipts received against purchase orders from the day before. So we look back one day, we pull in all receipts that the warehouse has shelved and are ready to sell. We look at the spread. If you open up maybe the remove extra columns, the last step there, or this, one, and just scroll across. You'll see we have a quantity, and then you'll see outlet quantity, retail quantity, marketing quantity, wholesale quantity. So we're basically saying, of these units arrive, these units need to go to these virtual warehouses so the appropriate teams can sell them. So we're always looking back one day. In a perfect world, it would be real time, but this is a pretty good medium here. It's done early in the morning, the following day. So we're pretty happy with the timing on it.
That's awesome. And then the third data set that we're working with here is more data from NetSuite. And I think this card is a particularly interesting example of using AI to simplify how we are cleaning and transforming data. Chris, maybe you can talk to us about what we're doing here, and then we can show what this used to look like before AI.
Yeah, sure. So we are looking at wholesale orders where we have back orders against the units, as in we have units we are selling to wholesale customers, and we are waiting for those units to come in. So we're looking at those units, we're figuring out how far ahead those sales orders are. In this case, I think it's 120 days. We do a lot of that criteria in NetSuite. We then look at, I've ordered 100 units, they've come in yesterday. I have 40 awaiting fulfillment for a wholesale order. I then later on take that into account and take those units from another virtual warehouse if we don't have enough units to fulfill them.
Very cool. And so previously, you were kind of building out that logic with this string of steps that we see here. Maybe we're looking at 15 or so steps. Want to talk about kind of how you have used these new steps to kind of simplify that logic?
Yes. So a lot of this is, on occasion, I have to, first off, I'm standardizing the data, right? So anything that's missing a value where it should have one, anywhere where there's a null value, I'm identifying those, I'm giving them dummy values so I can then use it. I am looking at the ship-in date on wholesale orders. So I know, do I have to allocate these units to that order? If an wholesale order is more than 120 days out, we are not going to allocate off this incoming PO.
Totally. And previously, I know you had a bunch of steps here to do things like format dates, add 4 months to today's date, filter out beyond 120 days, so on and so forth. And thought it was pretty cool how now just kind of typing in exactly how you'd like the logic applied, just keep rows where the ship end date has either passed or is within the next 4 months. And we're quickly narrowing down that data set here.
Yes, much quicker, much easier for someone coming after me to read this in English and establish what is happening.
Very cool. And so once we use that AI to ultimately clean and transform our data, we start to actually combine a lot of that data. And then we get into a lot of if-else logic here. Can you walk us through what we're doing in this section of the flow and the alerting setup here?
Yes, so the add retail allocation from Google Sheet, I'm looking at, as I noted before, we may only send, the PO might say we're sending 40 to retail. The planning team have decided, actually, we're only sending 20. So I basically go through, if what is on the retail allocation sheets is less than what's on the PO, I'm going to change it to that lesser amount, and then I'm going to reallocate those 20 units off to .com or wholesale or somewhere else. In the case that retail needs more than were received, as in we expected 100 t-shirts to come in on a shipment, and for some reason a box dropped off in the Atlantic, we only have 50. I'm going to do some math here. I'm going to alert the planning team that, hey, we're short some units here. And then I'm going to do some math to either try and get those units back if they're spare, and if they're not, the planning team will have to come up with a plan on the fly.
Right. So really about looking for exceptions in the data set, and as soon as something's identified, notifying relevant stakeholders, both internally and externally, so you can kind of plan for those edge cases and take action as quickly as possible.
Correct.
Awesome. Once we have kind of worked through that section of the flow, I know you've kind of described a lot of the if-else logic here as kind of like a waterfall of allocations. Walk me through how you kind of think about setting up this logic.
Yeah, so we look at where in cases where the amount that we ordered is exactly the same as the amount that we expected and we got, and all of the quantities that we've got listed on a PO are excellent, nothing happens. This just will keep all values the same. In cases where, say, wholesale needs an extra 30 units, I'm going to look at a location, and we have logic of what's more important than the other. And I'm going to basically waterfall those units down. I need 30 for wholesale, so I'm going to take them from Rhone.com first. If Rhone.com doesn't have enough, I'm going to take them from marketing. If marketing doesn't have enough, I'm going to take them from outlet. So it waterfalls down until we get to the number that we physically have on hand.
Totally. And yes, there's a lot of steps here, but as we click into any one of these, we can see the actual logic in any given step isn't all that complicated here. Basically saying, hey, if our retail quantity is less than 0, then we should add up our marketing quantity plus our retail quantity. Otherwise, just set the value in the marketing quantity column to be its current value. And so using that stacked on top of each other just to transform all those different values to get to your final allocation.
Correct.
Very cool. We ultimately get to a place in this flow where we can see for every different SKU here, the correct quantity across all of our different channels. And then we get to merging this with the original NetSuite data that we were looking at. So how do you kind of use this flow for wholesale back order units?
So this part looks at, are there units that need to be assigned to wholesale that previously were not? It looks at if we need to ship those in the next 3 months, and if we have units available, we will move them to the wholesale allocation location, and we will take them from elsewhere. This looks more than it's really doing. It's really just saying, hey, I have X amount of units and wholesale needs X amount of units. Can I take those? Can I commit them?
Totally. Simple as you say it, but a lot of business logic that took a long time to ultimately figure out and implement into this flow for sure.
Correct. Yeah.
Beautiful. So we get into the home stretch here. We're calculating percent variance and filtering for where our wholesale back order is more than what we've received. And then we get into our final formatting. Chris, can you maybe talk about how we round out this flow and how we're leveraging AI here?
Yeah. So a big part of this is having a document ready to upload to create the transactions necessary to move the inventory. All of this is in vain if you still have to go in and manually move the inventory. So this part of the flow is creating an uploadable ready CSV to go straight into NetSuite.
Amazing. And previously, when we were looking at this flow, I know this was a pretty monstrous card here for doing some of our formatting since we were handling each channel in a kind of branch of the flow. Have been able to now replace all 25 plus of these steps with a custom transform step here. How do you think about where it makes sense to maybe take complex logic and simplify it with one of these AI steps?
Yeah, so I think this is a great use case, right? So I have 5 different channels that I need to figure out each line and each SKU and each quantity for. As you can see, it's a lot of sort of arbitrary steps to get to the final product and a lot of stacking and combining tables. I think anything where the solution is actually quite simple or the output is simple, but the way to get there becomes more than 5 or 6 steps, I think the AI steps come in handy. They're really good at taking a very simple instruction and outputting the correct output as opposed to doing all the work I previously did.
Well said. And something that I always appreciate is within all this logic being described, we can kind of check exactly how that document's being formatted. So it's not this black box of what is the AI doing to my data, but you can kind of read bullet by bullet exactly how this transformation is happening. Very cool. Well, Chris, before we jump over to our next workflow here, anything that you would add to allocations?
Other than this type of flow having a lot of application to other things, no, I think the same formula, overarching formula here, is very applicable to a lot of other things that operational teams would be facing.
Yep, totally hear you there. And to Vince's question in the chat here around, if the AI step is powerful enough to consolidate all of this waterfall logic that we have listed out here, my gut instinct would be yes, that if we're able to describe in plain language exactly what we're doing in this section of the flow, should be able to replicate that with a custom transform step. Something I always think about is balancing the readability of our flow with how much complexity we're packing into a single step. Yes, there are a lot of steps here, but it's really easy to step through and understand what we're doing step by step. So if there's a way to find a good solution between, yes, I'm packing all this complex logic in one step, but it's still easily readable, that's a good kind of combination here. And, for this specific step, I was trying to understand exactly what we were doing here before the call. So this is a good example where I asked Parabola's AI, hey, high level, explain what's happening in the calculate allocation card. And then it gave me a nice high level summary here. So you can imagine maybe we get a more detailed summary, we put it directly into a custom transform step and can start to replicate a lot of that logic here. Awesome. All right, jumping on to our next use case here. Let's talk about inbound PO tracking. Chris, can you tell me a little bit about what this is and why it's challenging?
Yeah, so in order to track all our inbound packages across all our freight forwarders, we keep that information in an Airtable where we're keeping track of shipment information, when it's on the boat, when it's expected to arrive at port, when it's expected to arrive at the warehouse, shipment IDs, rates, values, costs, etc. One of the tricky things with doing this and trying to have a more holistic, top-down approach to looking at it was how do we get the data into Airtable? Previously, my good friend Tommy from the operations team was doing this by hand. As shipments came in, to this day, a lot of freight forwarders are still using email and PDFs to get this information across. So we were sort of double handling. We were putting this information in Airtable and also updating NetSuite manually at the same time. What we were trying to do was just have a central place where we could see all shipments, what their status was, when they're going to be here. So we started with, let's try and take all that information from NetSuite at the PO level and just move it to Airtable automatically, which is what this step does. And it definitely saved, at least 20 hours a month of time, that was previously taken to do this.
Wow, that's really awesome. And when you talk about just the different tools involved here, we're working with NetSuite, Airtable, we're working with email. How did you ultimately decide that Airtable was the tool to use here for tracking in transit?
Like a lot of people like me, I didn't have a choice. It was already in place. This is, but Airtable is a good example of a database that is very customizable, very easy to push to from APIs and other connections. So, ultimately Airtable was the right choice for us. We really wanted something where we could have a dashboard as well, and a dashboard that has we're sending this out to the business every week. These units are going to arrive. These ones aren't. These ones are stuck on the ocean. So it was pretty important to have somewhere central where we could keep everything.
Totally hear you. And jumping into the flow here, we can see that you're pulling in some data from your email, you're pulling data from Airtable. Can you walk us through what we're building out in this flow here?
Yeah, so we're pulling PO data from the last day. Now, this is actually one of 5 flows. So this deals with simply new POs. So a PO created the day before. We've just placed this order for a PO, or the PO's in the system. We expect this PO to be created at one of our factories and sent in. So this flow just deals with the new. And then I have 5 other flows for dealing with cancel, one for updates at the line level, updates at the header level, etc. So we can keep track of if dates change, if X factory dates change, etc. So this particular flow is just looking at any POs created the previous day.
Very cool. And so we're pulling in that data from our email. We're doing things like formatting, we're cleaning, we're doing some filtering here to remove our total row at the bottom. And then we are looking for non-unique document numbers. What are we doing in this alerting section of the flow here?
So this is a duplicate review step. So oftentimes, and I think I've actually fixed this on the NetSuite side so it doesn't happen, but I kept it in for continuity, that if we have a change, if a PO gets created and there is a change at the line level, we would end up with duplicates out of NetSuite. NetSuite can be quite particular about how its saved searches are built up and what you're actually able to get out. One of the main reasons this is emailed and not on an API NetSuite step, is because we have formulas doing work on the NetSuite side, and to get that data out in readable, usable format, we actually need to email it. We can't really use a NetSuite step. In this case, on occasion, we would end up with duplicates. We carry on with inputting that data into Airtable, but it goes to our inbound operational team member so that they can just be aware that there were multiple changes to that PO when it was created.
Totally. And I think maybe in a perfect world, 100% of flows are 100% automated. But in reality, a lot of flows do end up looking like this, where maybe there is 10% of the process that actually needs a human to review it, but at least we can automate the other 90% and really just focus that 10% on those exceptions that actually require some human action there. And so that's what we're doing in the alerting section of the flow. The other thing here that we're doing is actually integrating directly with Airtable. And what are we doing in this bottom section of the flow here?
So we are pulling in everything that is currently in Airtable. So we have thousands historic data going back years. So there's thousands of records in Airtable. So I'm pulling in all that data from Airtable so I can do a compare with the POs that were created yesterday and make sure I'm not duplicating them in Airtable. Basically, does this exist in Airtable right now?
Totally. And then it's not just one step to look for duplicates. It's also, hey, once we've pulled in data from yesterday with our historical data, then you start to get into some other interesting deduping logic here. What are you doing in this custom AI transform step?
Right. So when we want to bring out the style color of the product that's being imported, due to the way NetSuite searches work, we are going to end up with duplicate style colors in one box, in one cell. So it's very difficult to manually dedupe those. Let's say I've got a style color with extra small through extra large. Let's 7 or 8 different. I'm going to have 8 duplicates basically in one cell. In order to, you can see them there. So in order to dedupe these, if I had to do it manually, it would look much like that waterfall step. I would have to drag them each out by comma separated into their own cells and then do a lot of work. This just makes it very, very easy.
Totally. And as we can see here, this is a good example where this looks like actually the same code repeated, 6 times here. And then with this prompt, we're bringing that down to just one per unique instance there. So good use of AI step there. And then similarly, using some AI for date formatting. Chris, I don't know if you've had the same experience, but it's come up on every webinar so far that using AI to standardize and make sense of dates and do date math is one of the most just practical, low-hanging opportunities to simplify some operations.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt. It can be a frustrating experience to spend 25 minutes trying to format a date. It can be frustrating. Yeah.
I hear you. Very cool. Well, we get to the end of this flow, and this is a good example where we truly can have things to end integrated, where you receive something via email. We have this whole pipeline for transforming, comparing our data, and then you're actually pushing some of that data that you know to be clean, you know to be deduped directly to Airtable, and then we're sending another email here. Anything else you'd add to this flow that really makes it one of the more valuable ones in the kind of Rhone collection here?
I mean, it's valuable just for the hours it saves. If you have to go and look up a PO or pull a report of all POs that were created yesterday, then you have to manually, copy and paste each data point. And I could be wrong, but I think there's maybe 20 columns that we push to Airtable. That's a lot per PO. That's a lot of data to be individually pushing over.
Yeah, if you're filling out 20 fields for 7 rows of data, quick math there, that's a lot of fields to update.
A lot of fields.
So definitely hear you on the time savings there. And one thing that we didn't talk about a ton here is the AI chat interface in Parabola to basically build flows, troubleshoot, so on and so forth. As teammates at Rhone start using Parabola and experiencing the tool for the first time, I'm curious what advice you give to new users, whether that is with this new chat interface or just building in general.
Yeah. So, I mean, first thing I would say is, identify the problem, identify what you ideally, hypothetically, would like the solution to be, and then type it into the AI chatbot. Like, type that into the AI chatbot. I think a lot of the trouble early on when I started building was actually identifying what the problem really was, and then, hypothetically coming up with a solution, only to find out later, before the AI chat was here, that you couldn't do it that way. And I think this gives you a good overview of how you're going to go about it.
Right. So going from, hey, I know what the problem is, here's what I think the idea is, and then actually using this chat to kind of connect the dots to the practical solution, the right steps, so on and so forth.
Correct. Yes.
Yep. Amazing. Well, with the last 10 or so minutes that we have here, would love to shift gears to a little Q&A. If you do have any questions for Chris, feel free to throw them in the chat here. And maybe while we're waiting for some questions to roll in, Chris, wanted to get going here. We obviously walked through inventory allocation. We walked through tracking in-transit POs. What are either some of the next flows that you're most excited to build, or other flows that we didn't have a chance to talk about here that are particularly exciting?
Yeah, great question. So I think, I don't want to undersell how important the audit part of Parabola is particularly for the operations team. We're responsible for making sure all orders from all channels make it to our 3PL and ship out. And, auditing that prior to Parabola was very painful and it took, half an hour to 40 minutes each time we're doing that, and we're doing that multiple times a day. The order tie-outs between, and we order tie-out from Shopify to NetSuite to our 3PL. So we're tying out the full breadth of every order, including wholesale, including Amazon, any sales channel. It saves us an enormous amount of time. During sale periods, we're doing that tie-out more often with increased volume. So we have extra flows that we built specifically for sale periods, busy periods, item fulfillments as well. So when we're expecting transactions back, making sure all those transactions are legitimately populated in our ERP, and making sure those populated into Shopify. Yeah, cannot understate how important the auditing part is.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I remember way back when Nancy and I were chatting, shout out Nancy, about kind of like how we think about value associated with Parabola. One of the big things she kept pointing to was, if my team no longer has to work nights and weekends reconciling data between systems, that's really hard to quantify, but that's unbelievably valuable. So I think that's definitely been a big win from this partnership as well. We had a question here from Brian. If you had to guess, how much time do you think that you've saved with the inventory allocation workflow on a monthly basis?
Dude, I have to defer to Kelly for this one, but I'm going to say, at least 10 hours a week. I mean, they're not having to pull multiple reports. We're still in a period of manually auditing this flow. So yeah, 1 to 2 hours a day is definitely accurate. Yeah, so you're looking at about 10 hours a week. But yeah, we're still in the period of auditing it to make sure our logic matches what we expect. So Kelly and her team are doing that daily. But certainly large, yeah, very, very large hour savings. And those are hours we compile into things that, matter more than the sort of data crunching.
Totally. Those are some awesome time savings there. And one other question we had from Truce here. If you were kind of starting over with Parabola and your AI and automation journey, what would you kind of approach differently, if anything?
I don't know if I'd change anything. I liked the process of getting things wrong. It taught me more than getting things right. I think just dipping your toes in the water is really the best advice I could give anyone. Like just trial it and build something that matters. Find a problem that you really want a solution to, and try and build it. If you can't build it, use a Parabola team; they'll help you. But if something saves you 2 hours a week, that's a lot of hour savings over a year. I just think, don't be afraid to get things wrong, and don't be afraid to be ambitious.
Well said. Well, Chris, you, Nancy, Robin, rest of the Rhone team have been really amazing partners, and I really appreciate you joining for today's session. I'll round it out with one last question from Vince here. Always a fun one. If you could pick one feature for Parabola to introduce next to eliminate your big headache, what would it be?
It would be cell manipulation. So the ability to treat a data set like an Excel set, right? Sort on the fly, cell manipulation on the fly.
Totally. We need Airtable and Parabola to have a baby, and then I think we come close. I
Yeah.
love the idea, Chris. And just to give everyone a sense of what else they can expect this week, so far we've had now three awesome sessions with Vince and Mallory. Those sessions are available on Parabola's YouTube page, and Chris's session will be up on YouTube after the session as well. Tomorrow we have Sam from Janie and Jack joining to show us how she has a flow set up to parse PDFs from 3 different freight carriers, digitize those, and then use those for a shipment actualized cost tracking flow. And we also have Crystal from Tushy joining for end of month financial reporting. So a packed week ahead, and appreciate everyone joining in today's session. Chris, thanks again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. Hope to see you tomorrow. Have a good one.
Thanks.